year Alex got everything he wanted for Christmas. The list, times 2. It was the third Wednesday in November, a rainy day in New York City, and Alex was in a bit of a snit. He was in his room having to commit time to an activity he did not want to be doing, particularly on the third Wednesday of November. The activity in question was, in his mother's words, to pare down his Christmas list because it was unreasonable. He did not want to pare down his Christmas list. It had taken him exactly 226 days, Alex was good at math, to capture all of the things currently listed before him. His mother was a lawyer and worked for some sort of agency that helped find homes for kids other people didn't want, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Alex had learned when she started using lawyer words like unreasonable, contractual, and unmitigated, it was a bad sign. Perhaps, if he'd had a little more time to think, he wouldn't have said some of the things he said, things that resulted in his current situation. Sometimes, he had learned, it was better just to answer the questions people asked you and then stop talking. The problem was that Alex was very rarely capable of doing that. The stopping talking part. As a result, on this gloomy, rainy third Wednesday of November, Alex got trapped into having a conversation with his mother where he said much, much more than he should have. The conversation went something like this. Alex's mom, sitting in front of her computer. Alex, honey, could you come in here for a minute? Alex, sitting in front of the TV, watching Disney's Hercules. Why? Later, he would think of this as mistake number 1. It was usually a bad idea to cop an attitude with his mother. Alex's mom, in a significantly colder tone. Because I asked you. Alex had pulled himself away from the TV and with a big sigh sulked his way into the family office. He was gearing up for a bit of a whine when he was cut short. Alex's mom. Friday is Black Friday, and your aunt and uncle want to know what you want for Christmas. What should I tell them? Of course, Alex had already known this Friday was Black Friday. Most kids his age knew this. At least, most kids living in the United States knew this. Alex couldn't be sure about kids who lived in all those other countries. But in America, Black Friday was the Friday after Thanksgiving. It was the biggest shopping day of the year. Alex didn't know why it was called Black Friday. It made it sound like it was a bad day. But as far as Alex was concerned, it was a great day. It was the day his mother, as well as his aunts, uncles, and grandparents, would get on the computer and do much of their Christmas shopping. As a result, Alex knew that he should have his Christmas list ready before this day. Of course, Santa usually brought him his coolest gifts, but Mom and Dad weren't too shabby in the gift department. So, this was why Alex already had his list prepared. In fact, he had not only prepared his own list, he had helped his 4-year-old brother Trenton write his list as well. But unfortunately, he had chosen this moment to share the list with his mom. In retrospect, it turned out not to be the best of moments for an actual list. He should have just answered the questions with 1 or 2 gift ideas and left it at that for the moment. He later thought of this as mistake number 2, but at the time had plunged ahead anyway. I have a list, it's almost finished, he had said, as he trotted off to get it. When he had returned, he was carrying several sheets of paper that had been messily stapled and taped together. Each page was a multicolored list of things he wanted. In addition to the objects on the list, he'd also included a few stars, dots, check marks for each entry. When his mother gave him a quizzical look, he started explaining the list, how he had created it, the different categories of gifts, the color coding, and the symbols found at the end, which are designated by likely giver, Santa, Mom, Dad, little brother, etc. His mother had taken the list, perused it for a second, and then widened her eyes in an alarming fashion. However, when she spoke, her voice had that calm, soft tone. He should have recognized it as the I need to teach my child a lesson tone, but he had been too caught up in his train of thought to notice. Honey, don't you think it's a bit much to have 156 things on your Christmas list? She had asked. Huh? Alex stopped mid-thought. No, they're just the things I want, he replied. Sweetie, his mom had begun in an even sweeter and more dangerous tone. This was the I may have to take away privileges to make a point tone, and Alex had often thought he could hear Trust in Me from Jungle Book playing gently in the background whenever she used it. Unfortunately, he hadn't really been paying attention at that moment. There are children out there who don't have enough food to eat, she had said with unnatural sweetness. There are children who don't have warm clothes, or good schools, or even homes. These little kids would be happy just to get one present. Alex heard this lecture before. His mom was always telling him that he shouldn't want too much and that there were kids out there that didn't have anything. Adults were always saying things like this. Sure, he felt sorry for kids who didn't have anything, and he would happily share what he had with them. He really did feel sorry for them. He'd actually spent time before he went to sleep at night trying to figure out how to get food to little starving kids on the TV commercials. He'd asked the lunch lady at school if they couldn't just ship all the extra food that the kids didn't eat to Africa. At least the stuff that could be frozen. He wasn't stupid. He'd even offered to personally put his uneaten green beans on ice and send them to starving kids more locally, almost every time his mother had served them. But, as far as he could tell, she was the one who didn't want to share with people less fortunate. In any case, knowing all this did not stop him from wanting things. Only adults thought that way. So you don't think Santa would find it greedy of you to be asking for 156 things when you already have so much? She had asked. Alex had pondered that for maybe a whole 5 seconds before he committed mistake number 3. Well, I can add a few more things to my list, and then I could send the extra stuff I get to kids who don't have anything, he said brightly. This had seemed reasonable to him at the time, and it was a good start. He should have stopped there, but he didn't. Besides, he had continued, I really have been good this year, and Santa can make as many gifts as he wants, so why can't I just send him a list of everything I want? I bet other kids send lists just as long or longer. A lot of the kids in my class already have the list of stuff on my list, and they get new stuff all the time. How come their parents always... At this, his mother had snapped. Maybe it was what he said, maybe it was the tone, but whatever it was, her next words had lost all the sweet quality and were short, crisp, and direct. Because their parents aren't your parents, and because having 156 things on your Christmas list is unreasonable and greedy, she had said. Go to your room and pare that list down to the 10 things you really want, or I will do it for you. But Mom! Now, she had said with all the flexibility of concrete. So here he was, trying to pick out 10 things he wanted most from his list. From the other room, Alex could hear his mom call his little brother Trenton to the room to get his Christmas list. Trenton had dutifully trotted into the room, carrying a piece of paper where Alex had written his list for him like it was a treasure. Trenton was only 4, and so when he asked what he wanted for Christmas, he usually gave answers like, I want a tree, or I want a turkey, or the ever-popular, I want a yellow present. Trenton was predictable that way. As the gloomy third Wednesday of November became even gloomier in the fading light of late afternoon, Alex struggled with how to narrow down his list. But as he was reading through his long list, a small part of him began to think that maybe his mother was a little bit right. After all, if he was having this much trouble even rereading his own list, then it would be likely Santa wouldn't be too happy about having to sort through it. It probably would make him look just the teensiest bit greeny. So, after considerable thought, he decided to narrow his list down to 20 things. One list of 10 things were for his parents and relatives. The other list of 10 things would go directly to Santa. He figured that this would be reasonable enough. When he finished, his 2 lists looked like this. Alex's Christmas list, Mom and Dad version. 1. Street-serving whiplash wave scooter. 2. A lateral drift remote control helicopter. 3. A silver pirate ship bank. 4. A 15-foot round trampoline combo with bonus bag toss game. 5. A turtle. Alex didn't really want one because turtles weren't as cool as, say, a griffin, but Trenton did. Unfortunately, Trenton was too young to take care of it, so Alex thought that he would ask for one and share it with him. 6. A Wii PlayStation or Xbox. This was something quite big to ask, but Alex thought his mom might really want it as well, because she always said, go ask your dad, you don't have to convince me, when he brought it up. So he thought he had a shot. 7. A microscope. 8. A hamster with a hamster ball. An unlikely one, as his dad had already nixed his requests for a dog, a cat, a horse, a miniature pig, and even a goldfish, but he thought it was worth a try anyway. 9. Pokemon cards. 10. Avengers comic books. Alex's list for Santa. Alex's list for Santa was quite different. Alex dreamed of different worlds. He read as much Greek mythology as he could, within his reading capability. In his spare time, he painted Pokemon. He was fairly obsessed with all things Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. He watched Disney's Hercules until even his dad knew the lyrics to all the songs. Given this, there were things that Alex really, really wanted that he was fairly sure Mom, Dad, or even his most generous relatives would be unable to provide. It was these things, the things he wanted most, that he put on his list for Santa. 1. A magic crystal necklace that showed you the future. 2. A pet monkey. 3. A Christmas wish box. This was a box predominantly featured in a cartoon show that Alex watched religiously when he was younger, and that Trenton now watched religiously. It granted the bearer of the box one Christmas wish. It seemed like it could be used for anything he wanted, so Alex was hooked. Plus, Trenton would think it was cool. 4. A secretary bird. This was a fairly large and odd-looking bird that was featured in Alex's favorite animal book. 5. A real Pikachu. Alex had made up some of his own Pokemon, but he thought it was safer to ask for a classic as a gift. 6. A griffin. He loved the griffins he'd read about in his mythology books and thought it would be super cool to have one as a pet. 7. an iPad. His mom had an iPhone, his dad had an iPad. Alex knew that they wouldn't buy him one, as they said he was too young, but he thought Santa might be a bit softer. 8. A kingfisher. He wasn't really sure what this was, but he thought it was some kind of bird and it had a great name, so he wanted one. 9. A thermometer that would tell the temperature of anything you put it on. This was really for Trenton as well, because Trenton was strangely obsessed with thermometers. Weird. And the last one was a big one. 10. To be made a god. This was the direct result of watching the aforementioned Hercules, who spent the greater part of the movie trying to reclaim his godhood. After a second read-through, Alex decided it was pretty good and stuffed it in the drawer of his bedside table until later. Santa replies through the power of email. Alex had finished this list by dinner time, but as Alex was a very smart boy, he decided it was better to give the list to his parents after the Daddy Comes Home dinner and bath insanity. This was the time that he and Trenton usually sat down with Mom and Dad to read a book or watch a TV show or whatever else piqued the family's interest. On this particular night, Trenton had asked to watch How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Actually, asked was a bit of an understatement. What actually occurred was more similar to a cowboy herding reluctant cows towards a holding pen, with Trenton acting as the cowboy and the rest of the family in the role of cow. When Alex went willingly, his mother shot him a questioning glance. There was usually a bit of a battle between him and his brother on nights that the family chose to watch TV, as any self-respecting 6-year-old will not willingly submit himself to the treacle-like taste of your average 4-year-old. But tonight, Alex had other things on his mind. Once the family had settled into their couch, Alex excused himself to get his list. When he returned, he was holding both lists proudly. As he snuggled next to his mom, he handed her the list for Mom and Dad. "I see you finished your list," she said after she scanned it, with a bit of a crooked smile on her face. "I'm proud of you for getting it down to 10. I didn't mean to snap at you before, but I don't want you to grow up to be selfish and greedy. People like that can have a hard time in life." "I know, Mom," he said, giving her a hug. "What's that?" she asked, noticing that he had not given her all of the sheets of paper. "It's my list for Santa," he said, tentatively. She gave it the give it here motion, so he handed it over a bit sheepishly. He wondered if she would consider it greedy, but she only smiled. "Wow," she said, handing the list over to his dad, who raised his eyebrows and smiled. "That's a pretty tough list, even for Santa." "So can you email it to Santa?" he asked. His mother was lucky enough to have Santa's direct email address. She had once told him that one of her clients had a friend who knew an elf. So most of his lists to Santa were sent twice. The first was sent via email. The second would be mailed nearer to Christmas time. Alex thought Santa would like it better if he got one handwritten list directly from him. "Okay," his mother said. "I suppose it has to be now?" Alex smiled and nodded as she headed for her office. Once in the office, his mother dutifully sat down in front of her computer and typed his list into an email. She then clicked the send button, and off it went. She then turned to Alex with a soft smile. "Honey, I don't want you to be too disappointed if you don't get the things on this list," she said. "These are really hard things to give someone. Some of them are hard to find. Others are almost impossible to grant, like, I don't think Santa can make you a god." At this point, the computer made that little sound that indicates an incoming email. "Well, I thought Santa was magic, and if he's magic, then he should be able to do anything," Alex replied. "Besides, if I was a god, then I could fix everything, like the problem with the hungry kids on TV, or I could make a home for that guy who lives on the street down the block." "Maybe, but things rarely work out the way you think they will. And some things people want aren't really good for them. For example, if we allowed Trenton to, he would do nothing but eat ice cream all day." Alex giggled. It was true. "But that would be very bad for him, and..." His mother absently turned back to her computer and opened up a new email, and her words were cut short. Alex saw his mother's eyes widen alarmingly. She also turned very, very pale. "Mom?" She said nothing, but she was reading and quietly mouthing the words. She only did this when she was very focused. "Mom, what is it?" he said, leaning forward to look over her shoulder. "It's an email to you," she replied, "from Santa." Alex suddenly felt as if everything were slowing down. His heart began to pound. He'd never had an email from Santa before. He'd heard from some other kids that they got emails from Santa, but he suspected they were lying. But from his mother's reaction, he was pretty darn sure this one was real. "Can I read it?" he said. "No," his mother said quickly and turned the computer monitor off. "There's a part of it that's only for me," she replied more calmly. "I will read it to you in a little bit, but I need you to watch TV while I talk to Daddy. Can you get him, please?" "Mom, I got an email from Santa! Santa, I want to see it!" "Now," his mother snapped. So Alex dutifully fetched his father and plopped down on the sofa next to Trenton, who immediately began a game of try and put my butt in my big brother's face. His parents stayed in the office for what seemed like an eternity. When they returned, his father turned as pale as his mother had been. "Can we read it now?" Alex asked, jumping up. "Your mother will read it to you in her office," her father responded with a very serious expression. This was odd because his father was almost never serious. "But before she does, I want you to know that you're being given a very special honor, and you should think very carefully before you do anything." "Okay," he replied, "but can we read it now?" His father nodded, and Alex bolted for the office. His mother was sitting at the computer, still pale. She motioned for Alex to sit down on a chair. She then opened up her laptop and began to read. "Dear Alex," she began, "I got the email from your mother with your Christmas list. I must admit to you that it is a very challenging list, even for me. But I have a particular unit of elves who are specialists in making the impossible possible. They have a secret website with an address that I only give out to boys and girls who've been exceptional during the year. I'm not sure if you know this, but I make sure that every girl and every boy in the world has a guardian elf. Not those stuffed elf-on-the-shelf toys, but a real invisible one. This is an elf that watches them every day to see if they are being naughty or nice. This year, I've gotten extremely good reports on you from Alonzo, your elf. I was particularly impressed the time you let your little brother cut your hair. I know that your mother wasn't happy about that, but I was very touched by the fact you cared more about his happiness than you did about your appearance. Al took some video footage of this, and we truly enjoyed seeing you both laugh so much. I must say your hair really did look funny when he was done. This was just one example. All year you've tried to be kind, considerate, and loving to your family and to strangers. I also saw it when you gave your favorite Pokemon card to the man who begs for money in your building. This was very kind of you. I might add he also works for me, so he's told me that you talk to him every day and that you're polite and very considerate. Also, you're always defending Olivia at school when Hugo tries to pick on her, even though the other kids make fun of you for doing it, because she picks her nose and eats it. All in all, there is something special about you that I want to reward in a very important way. So all of that being said, I'm attaching a link to the website I mentioned. The address is www.everythingIwantforchristmas.com. Your login will be Alex. Your password will be Pokemon. You will be asked to enter 10 things you want most for Christmas. You can then list any 10 things you want. It doesn't have to be the same ones that you sent me just now. You can change your mind if you like. In fact, I think it's better if you think about your list carefully before you decide the things you want. And I must insist that you let your mother type these things in. It's extremely important that there are no mistakes. After the list has been received, all you need to do is wait. As I mentioned above, responding to these Christmas lists is the job of a very special and highly trained group of elves. So because of that, they're on a different schedule. You will get all 10 gifts you asked for on the afternoon of Christmas Eve. Congratulations on a great year, and I hope you have a Merry, Merry Christmas. With love, Santa. Alex just sat there for a moment. He couldn't believe it. An email from Santa, a secret website, any 10 things he wanted. How could he have gotten so lucky? Sure, he thought he'd been pretty good that year, but not that good. At this point, Alex started screaming and jumping around the room. He couldn't help himself. His mother just sat there. She was smiling, but it was a strange smile. Mom, he said, I get whatever 10 things I want. Anything. Pull up the website. Alex, his mother said, we're not going to look at it tonight. Did you hear what Santa said? We will do it tomorrow. Between now and then, you should think more about your list. With that, she insisted they change the conversation. That night, Alex could hardly sleep. He kept thinking about his list. When the next day finally came and he wrestled his mom to the computer, the web page that came up was very simple. In fact, there was nothing much to it. There were no pictures, there were no words to speak of. There was only a green, white, and red striped background. In the center of the page, there was a white field where there were spots to type 10 things. At the bottom right of the screen was a button which said Activate List. So very slowly, very carefully, Alex's mom typed out his list. In the end, he had decided to go with his original list because it was the first one. After his mother finished typing, she read the list back to him. Are you sure about these things? She asked when she was finished. Yes, said Alex. Is everything correct? Look at everything. Look at the spelling. Look at what is capitalized and what is not. Alex read through his list again. Yes, he said. Okay, his mother said, and then with a small sigh, she clicked Activate List. The screen simply went bright green. It looked like a computer crash. After a few seconds, their normal homepage appeared, which was nothing extraordinary, just a search engine. And that was it. Alex didn't know what he was expecting. Snow to fall in his mother's office, the smell of peppermint and chocolate to permeate the air, iTunes to spontaneously play Bing Crosby's Christmas in Killarney. But none of these things happened. He turned around to see his father standing in the door of the office. No, he had not grown a Santa beard and belly. He looked back at his mother. She just gave a little shrug. "I guess we're going to have to wait until Christmas Eve," she said. The eternity waiting game. And wait he did. He had 30 days to wait until Christmas Eve. At first, it was really hard, particularly during that post-Thanksgiving weekend with its pre-Christmas sales and all the holiday gear going up. But once school resumed, things seemed to speed along at a quicker pace. The second week of December, Trenton got a nasty ear infection and kept everyone awake at night for 2 or 3 nights until the antibiotics kicked in. After that, Alex had to prepare for his very first round of pre-Christmas tests and projects. These two things caused enough flurried activity that a good 10 days passed fairly quickly. But by the time December 23rd had rolled around, time had slowed to a snail-like crawl, as it always does just before a long-awaited event. When it was finally time to go to bed that evening, his mother tucked him in and told him that he would not be going to school tomorrow because she didn't know exactly when his gifts would arrive and he would need to be present. She also told him she was going to take the day off work and that after nursery school, Trenton would be having an afternoon play date with his little girlfriend, so he would be out of the house until 6 or 7 that evening. Breakfast with the family and seeing Trenton off to school seemed to take an eternity. His mother spent most of the morning in her office reviewing contracts, but she seemed to have become obsessive about her iPhone, as she had what seemed to be an apoplexy when she couldn't find the charger. She scoured every room in the house, swearing under her breath, until she finally found it in her computer bag. Alex was going crazy with anticipation. He paced the house. He went to his mother's office and watched her type. He flipped through his comic books, sighing. Finally, his mother told him to go watch a movie because he was driving her crazy. Neither of them knew what time his gifts would be delivered, just that it would be in the afternoon. Once, at 12:02, both he and his mother were startled by the sound of something at the window. He jumped up from his spot in front of the TV, and his mother had run from her office, but it turned out to be just a pigeon. His mother mumbled something like, "worse than the cable guy," as she stalked out of the office. Alex gets his wishes. Alex's gift arrived, fittingly, at 12:25 p.m. With a loud thump, a large green and red striped box appeared in the middle of their living room, right next to their Christmas tree. On it was a tag that simply read, "Open me." Alex went up to the box slowly. He was anxious, but he didn't know why. Maybe the whole thing was a little too Alice in Wonderland. Suddenly, he didn't want to open the box, didn't want any of the things on his list. "You're just being a scaredy cat," he told himself. His mother came into the room to investigate the sound. When she saw the box, she too looked apprehensive. Alex went over and tried to pick it up, but it wouldn't budge. So he sat down next to it and rapped it with his knuckles a few times. It made a strange, almost hollow sound. "Well," his mother said, "are you going to open it?" It was not said with any tone of challenge or mockery, but it got him going nonetheless. "Yep," he said as he began to untie the bow. Within seconds, he had pulled all the wrapping paper off to reveal a plain white box. He had some trouble with the tape, so his mother gave him some scissors. Finally, he opened the box and looked what was inside. Inside the box were 10 small objects: a tiny necklace, a brown plastic monkey, a small silver box, a tiny yellow Pokemon figure, a figure of a tall, strange-looking bird, what looked to be a golden chess piece, a doll-sized thermometer, a plastic computer, a miniature airplane, and a figure of a fat infant with wings. Alex just stared at them for a moment. Was this a joke, or was it some sort of punishment for being greedy? After all, there were 10 things, and most of them could be one of the things he asked for. He waited, but nothing happened. Could Santa really be that mean? Or maybe it wasn't even Santa. Maybe there was just some weird person who sent them an email, or a relative who was teaching him a lesson. Could it be his mom? But she was standing right next to him now, looking at the box, and she looked equally perplexed. With eyes now filling up with tears, Alex looked back into the box. There they were, a necklace, like the crystal necklace, a monkey, a small box that he guessed could be the wish box, a Pikachu Pokemon, a plastic bird that did look a lot like the secretary bird, a chess piece in the shape of a griffin, a thermometer, and a replica of an iPad. He had no idea why there was a miniature airplane and a fat cherub. Maybe that was all they could find. In disgust, he shoved the box away from him and it toppled over, spilling the contents. Still nothing happened. His mother picked up the small airplane. She smiled a little bit as she held it out to him. On the side of it, it said Kingfisher Air, an airline named Kingfisher. He had asked for a Kingfisher. How funny. Alex could feel himself on the verge of a serious cry and was standing up to go to his room when his mother grabbed his shoulder. She was pointing to where he had thrown the wrapping paper. There, shining and hovering a few feet in the air, was what they had taken to be a label directing them to open the package. Instead, it appeared to be an envelope. Alex stepped forward and reached out. It felt cool to the touch when he plucked it from the air. It was indeed an envelope. And then, as he opened it, the envelope disappeared in his hand, replaced by thousands of silver, gold, and red sparkles that whirled and danced in the air. Looking back, Alex would think that what happened next seemed to take an hour, but in truth, it probably took less than 15 minutes. First, the objects on the floor began to shake. Then they began to glow green. Some of them began to spin, while others merely levitated a few inches above the ground. The sparkles from the envelope were still in the air, and a few got caught in his eyelashes. In the time it had taken to wipe his eye, a monkey appeared in the middle of their living room. A real live spider monkey. "My monkey!" Alex cried out. And it was a real monkey, all right. It immediately jumped from the floor to the Christmas tree and scrambled up it, causing it to tip over and crash into their entertainment center. The monkey shrieked and dashed from the room. Alex had just narrowly missed being hit by the tree, but now he had other concerns because there, also in the middle of their living room, was a huge beast. It was a griffin, and it had the head and wings of an eagle but the body of a lion. Admittedly, it was smaller than a lion you would see at the zoo, but it still dwarfed their living room and looked completely capable of ripping him to shreds within seconds. It might have done just that if something else hadn't caught its eye. That something else turned out to be a shiny and beautiful crystal necklace lying in the middle of their living room rug. So, being half bird and all, the griffin grabbed the necklace and crashed through the apartment towards the back bedroom. Alex, who had been slowly backing away since the appearance of the griffin, now collided with his mother. She was staring in the other direction at a giant bird. It was almost as tall as an ostrich, but had a strange, spiky plumage on the top of its head. "Your secretary, bird," she said in a voice that only trembled a little. The bird, hearing her, made a horrible squawking sort of sound and reached out to snap at her. She moved away just in time to miss the beak. Suddenly, a necklace appeared around the bird's neck that said, "Administrative Assistant Bird." It now grabbed the fully functioning iPad that had appeared next to it and flew off to roost in the dining room table. Alex, aware of the griffin in the back of the house, had not turned his back on the hall corridor, but now, behind him, from the proximity of the kitchen, there came a noise that sounded way too much like lightning, followed by a loud eek and the smell of singed hair. The monkey came bolting out of the kitchen and landed on the dining room table, colliding with the secretary bird, who had now discovered how to open Microsoft Outlook on the iPad, and from a quick glance seemed to be booking playdates for Alex with kids he didn't like. Alex didn't have time to worry about this as he had become caught in what seemed to be a miniature tornado emanating from the figure of a cherub. His hair was pulled uncomfortably. His clothes began to feel papery. All of this was associated with a strong smell of roses. Then the figurine vanished and the whirlwind stopped. But Alex was left standing naked in the dining room, save for a bow, a quiver of arrows with heart-shaped heads, and a giant diaper. Cupid, he thought. Did it have to be Cupid? He briefly noted that he should have been more specific in his God request before a total stranger came up to him and tapped him on the arm. It was a man in a uniform that said Kingfisher Air. He had a name tag that said Ranjit. "Excuse me," he said. "Santa rerouted our flights to Delhi, so it goes without saying that some of our passengers are a bit upset, particularly the business class customers. What is your Wi-Fi password? Some of them would like to be able to connect so they can log in at work and tell them what's happening." The man didn't seem put off at all by the fact that he was talking to a 6-year-old dressed in a diaper. But it's Christmas Eve. Why are they working? Was the first thing Alex's mouth spit out, independent of his brain, which had apparently gone on vacation for the afternoon. Clearly, he wouldn't lack for company in his absence, as the apartment was now filled with what seemed to be 25 people he didn't know. Most of them were men, most were wearing glasses or carrying computer bags, and none of them seemed to be freaking out about suddenly appearing in a medium-sized Manhattan apartment without landing, disembarking, airport security, immigration, or even an actual plane. "Our passengers are mainly IT professionals," the flight attendant whispered back, as though that explained everything. About half said professionals were now finding places in chairs, on couches, and on the floor, where they started pulling out their laptops. "Get out of my medicine cabinet!" Alex heard his mother yell, followed by a sound of a male voice saying, "Okay, but a few of us really need to use the restroom. The fasten seatbelts light has been on since we took off 3 hours ago." As Alex rounded the corner from the living room to the hall, he saw that roughly 10 of the IT folks were in line for the bathroom. "Fine," his mother snapped back, "but stay out of all the cabinets. If I find you have appropriated anything, I will make you sorry you were born." His mother was apparently dealing with the insanity of all this by falling into work mode. There was another sizzling crackle, followed by a sort of yelp. Another of the IT professionals came stumbling out of the kitchen, cradling his hand and saying, "I thought Pikachu was supposed to be friendly." A shriek came from the back of the apartment that caused Alex to whirl around quickly, accidentally poking one of the passengers with his arrows in the process. "Sorry," he muttered, only to hear the guy say, "She's so beautiful." Yet another of the Kingfisher Air passengers came running around the corner, holding his laptop in one hand and what was left of his trousers with the other. He had been in search of an additional electrical outlet and had wandered into the back bedroom, where apparently the Griffin was making a nest with the remains of Alex and Trenton's beds and bedsheets. In retaliation for this invasion of privacy, the Griffin had decided to add some pieces of the poor guy's trousers and belt to its masterpiece. From the smell of the retreating victim, fecal matter had become involved in this scenario in some way. Back in the living room, there was a flash of light, more sparkles in the air, followed by a contented sigh from all of the people holding laptops. One of the plane passengers was sitting next to the tree. He had opened the magic wish box in his hands, and there was a beatific smile on his face. "Long-range Wi-Fi with low power consumption and unlimited bandwidth," sighed a man sitting next to Alex. "Get off me right now," he heard his mother yell. She was now standing in the doorway of her office. She was holding her iPhone in one hand and trying to type something, while holding off the guy who had recently been pricked by Alex's arrow. "But I love you," he sobbed as he reached for her. "I said back the off." But the man would not be thwarted. He grabbed her around the waist and planted a kiss on her. She was forced to drop her iPhone in order to get him off. But she had the presence of mind to kick it in the direction of Alex. "Get my phone," she screamed, as she shoved her forearm in the man's Adam's apple. Alex ran forward and grabbed the phone. "What do I do?" he yelled back. "Dial Santa." "What's his number?" No, dial the numeric for Santa." Just at that moment, there was another lightning sound, this time coming from the dining room. With the sound came a tingly feeling in the air and a smell of ozone. When Alex looked down at the iPhone, there was no signal. He looked around helplessly as his mother grabbed a constitutional law hornbook from her office and beamed the guy assaulting her. It gave her just enough time to lock him in the office before he started battering the door with what looked like their office chair. "Alex, dial 92789, she called out. But he started to yell back, but then thought, they have a landline in the kitchen. So he ran down the hall towards the kitchen, but tripped over a power cord and went sprawling into the dining room, knocking over a chair and falling into the table and the secretary bird. The bird screeched at him and then typed the words Lindsey Graham into a meeting entitled Brunch. Alex didn't know any kid named Lindsey Graham, but somehow he suspected that he wouldn't like him. Alex pulled himself up and dashed for the kitchen and the phone on the wall, thankful that his father had insisted on having a landline installed, despite some eye-rolling from his mother. His mother had said they would never use it, and she had mainly been right, but his father had insisted on it in case of disaster. Well, this certainly qualified. As he ran past the heat vent, he was hit with a blast of air so hot it felt like it had come from an oven. The thermometer. He didn't know where it was, but somebody obviously had it. He made it to the kitchen, jumped over a startled Pikachu, who had now raided the fridge and was eating the fruitcake that his Aunt Desi had brought over. Amazingly, it seemed to like it. Alex grabbed the phone and dialed 72689. At first, nothing seemed to change. He wondered if it had worked when he heard an unnaturally perky female voice say, "Thank you for calling Santa today. Your Christmas list will be deactivated in 60 seconds. 59? 58? Alex put the phone on speaker just as he heard his mother scream. He ran back to the office in time to see the monkey make off down the hall with his mother's Christmas necklace. The one he had given her when he was 4 and that she wore every Christmas, despite the fact that they were beads made out of plastic and it was, quite frankly, ugly. But that was not what caused her to scream. The scream came from having her arm grabbed suddenly from the guy in the office, who had managed to splinter the door enough to get his hand through. Alex had never seen the movie The Shining, but he'd seen ads for it, and the similarity to the current situation was a little too close for comfort. Alex grabbed his mom and pulled her loose. "I called the number," he yelled over the din of the griffin, who was shrieking at the monkey, who was doing what monkeys do and showering the griffin with the gift of feces removed from its butt. His mother grabbed him and pulled him down into the corner of the living room. In the other room, a voice on the phone was saying, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, deactivated. A perky female voice came over the loudspeaker. "Thank you for participating in Everything I Want for Christmas, and have a Merry Christmas." As soon as she stopped speaking, a wind came up inside their apartment. Papers began fluttering. Books toppled from the shelf. Alex began to feel a sucking sensation originating from the center of their living room. Something that looked like a whirlpool was forming in the middle of their Turkish rug. Threads of the rug were unraveling and being pulled into a hole that was widening by the second. The secretary bird was the first to be pulled into the hole, still pecking at the iPad as she went. The singed monkey, its rear end covered in its own poop, was pulled from the kitchen where it had returned to sit on the top of the fridge and harass Pikachu. Pikachu was next, pulled into the hole with a mouthful of fruitcake. Then all the passengers from Kingfisher Air, one unfortunately caught in the act of doing what one does in the toilet, followed by the used Christmas wish box. The griffin held up valiantly, but even in the midst of the commotion, Alex noticed that it appeared somehow thinner and more transparent. After a struggle to hold onto various articles around the apartment, eventually it too was pulled into the vortex, magical crystal necklace and thermometer firmly in claw. And so it went that, one by one, all of the things on Alex's list got sucked into the hole, which made sounds that were disturbingly similar to the sound of digestion. The last things to go were Alex's own attire. The quiver, along with the bows and arrows, were yanked from him, even as the diaper disengaged itself and was deposited into the yaw of the carpet. Alex wasn't sorry to see them go, despite leaving him naked. It had been chafing him. All was quiet for a moment, and yet the vortex still swirled in their Turkish rug. In the relative silence, they heard a banging from the back of the apartment. It was the guy locked in the office. His mother ran back, unlocked the door, and yanked it open. The man looked dazed and no longer seemed obsessed with possessing the goddess, as he had been calling her. "Where am I?" he started, but he didn't get any further. The hole in the carpet flashed green and the man was sucked away in an instant. It was so quiet that he could hear a new voice from the phone. This one said, "New Christmas list activated," before the line went dead. Just as quickly as it had opened up, the hole closed, but not before three things happened. First, all of the damage done to the house from the commotion was just gone, as if nothing had ever happened. Alex even had his clothes back on. Second, something that looked like liquid light spewed forth from the hole and into different parts of the room, where it formed little glowing balls, which quickly began to take shape, forming 1. A Christmas tree, 2. A roast turkey on the table, and 3. One small present sitting under the tree. Lastly, just as the hole closed, a letter came floating out, and it dropped at Alex's feet. The note said, "To Alex, from Santa." Alex got up slowly and picked it up from where it lay on their completely undamaged Turkish rug. It read as follows. "Dear Alex, first I want to tell you that what I told you in my email was true. I do only let the very best children have access to my website. And clearly you've been a lovely boy all year. You are sweet-natured and kind to your parents. You take care of your little brother and play with him to a point that I consider beyond the call of duty for an older brother. You watch a little bit too much TV, but that doesn't seem to be keeping you from other pursuits. I can let that slide. So it was no accident that I sent your mother that email. It's also true, as you've seen, that you really do get all the things on your list. But as you might have guessed by now, the reason I give the best children access to this site is not so they can have everything they want. Or at least that's not my intention. My hope when I set up this website was to be able to teach children some important life lessons while they're still young enough for them to sink in. I have found that only the very best children are capable of understanding such a gift, and if they can, they tend to grow up to be truly remarkable adults. So, what are these lessons? First is the subject of an old saying, one which I made up more years ago than I care to mention, but it has stuck. It is still fairly popular. It is, "Be careful what you ask for, as you may get it." As you've no doubt learned, getting everything you want is not all it's cracked up to be. Things are rarely as exciting in reality as they are in our imaginations. This leads me to the second lesson. This is the lesson that is even harder to learn. In truth, most adults never learn it, no matter how hard I try and teach them. And it is this. When it comes to things above and beyond the basic human needs, wanting is often much better than having. Having almost always comes with lots of responsibilities and expectations attached, but dreaming is free. And the joy you have in dreaming about a thing and letting it drive your imagination is usually worth far more than anything you can hope to get out of actually getting that thing. This applies to all manner of things, from toys to relationships. There was a young man many years ago who was taught these same lessons, and he learned them well. He learned the value of giving over receiving. He learned that those things that are most precious are both free and fragile: love, kindness, generosity, strength, compassion. That young man learned the lesson so well that he was later given a red coat, a hat, and a handful of flying reindeer. Ever since then, he, his family, and his chosen helpers have been blessed with the chance to bring joy to children all around the world. So I guess what I want to say is that I hope these lessons will help you grow up to be as lucky as I have been. With love, Santa. P.S. I should say that your mom and dad were great children too. I was privileged to know them for a bit. If you want to know what Santa's helpers really look like, you need look no further than the faces of your parents. They may seem all tough on the outside, but you and I know better. Give them a kiss and a cuddle for me. P.P.S. The gifts in your house are now the ones from Trenton's Christmas list, who is a very special and loving child. I hope you enjoy them, and him. As Alex finished reading the letter, he wiped his eyes a little self-consciously. But when he turned, he found his mother had been reading the letter over his shoulder, and her eyes were shining with tears. She knelt before him, put her hands on either side of his face, and gave him a kiss on the forehead. He put his arms around her and gave her a huge hug. "Mom," he said, "did you guys know what would happen?" "Some of it," she replied. "We knew that Santa was trying to teach you. We knew why. We felt so proud that he thought you were worth this lesson." "But weren't you scared?" he asked. "Suppose you'd been hurt, or I'd been hurt." "I was scared a bit," she said, but Santa assured me that nothing would happen that it couldn't be made right. And you knew it was really Santa? He asked. Yes, she said. How? I met him once when I was little. It's a very long story, and let's just say that I was a very curious and very stubborn little girl. They both sat for a moment, basking in the silence, the smell of the turkey, and the twinkling lights on the tree. I guess Trenton had a better list, huh? Alex said. His mother laughed. Well, Trenton is 4. His wants and needs are much simpler. I hope they stay that way, Alex said softly. You do? Yes, I do. He got up and walked over to the tree, with the one present underneath. When he saw the present, a lump formed in his throat, because the one small yellow present under the tree had a name tag on it, and it said, for Alex. Trenton, it seemed, had asked for a gift for Alex. He picked it up and held it to his chest. His mom came up and put her arms around him. Then she stood up straight and wiped her eyes. She looked at the clock, which said 1:01. I think I'll call your father and tell him everything is okay. My guess is he'd like to come home early. And I'll call and cancel Trenton's play date, she said. I think I'd like to have the family home together for the evening. Yeah, that sounds nice, Alex said, smiling. But I think we don't need to tell Daddy the part about the guy in the office, do we? She winked. Alex smiled. That evening, their family had a lovely Christmas Eve turkey, courtesy of Trenton and Santa. Later, they opened one present each, as was their custom. As they sat down under the Christmas tree, with Trenton becoming very concerned about the proper positioning of Santa's cookies, Alex thought of the wish box. He didn't know if all the passengers from Kingfisher Air were real, but if they were, he hoped they'd made it safely to their final destination and had all the bandwidth they wanted. He didn't know if the Griffin was real, but he hoped that if it was, it had a nice nest somewhere. He hoped that Pikachu and the monkey made it safely back to wherever they came from. At that moment, what he felt, sitting there with his family and thinking these thoughts, was something close to joy. And Santa was right. It cost nothing at all.